The student just sneezed accidentally while he was lecturing, and he smashed his nailed shoe at the student's face, scratching it on the spot. White was also expelled from the school because of this violent teaching incident, and almost all schools in big cities dared not hire him. But White, who only knew how to be a teacher, had a wife and 2 daughters to support, and he had no choice but to go to the poorest and worst McFarland High School in the United States for an interview. When the principal saw White's bad record, he was still shocked on the spot. White not only violently punished students, but was also complained by parents several times. He even had a fight with the chairman of the board of directors. But considering his previous outstanding teaching performance and the shortage of teachers in the school, the principal still tried to ask him what the probability of him getting angry again in the future, and White just replied that it would not happen again. In this way, White got a work, became McFarland's football assistant, and also served as a biology and physical education teacher. But in the first class, another student challenged his bottom line. 3 students skipped class before he finished calling the roll, just because their mothers at the school gate urged them to go home and farm, and then another student mocked his name in public, saying it sounded like a vegetable market. Just as he promised the principal, this time he suppressed his temper and just asked the students to run around the playground once before leaving class. Now White just wants to live a stable life and bring his family back to the big city after saving enough money. But in the next football game, White still couldn't control himself and offended the head coach. Just because a thin student Johnny was knocked to the ground several times by the opponent's big player, Johnny squatted on the ground and groaned in pain, and finally had to be helped off the field by his teammates. After leaving the field, White found that Johnny had been knocked unconscious, but the head coach urged Johnny to play again. For Johnny's safety, White stopped him. From then on, White and the head coach officially became enemies. On the way home, White was always uneasy, because he had just moved to this remote place with his wife and children. If the head coach held a grudge and instigated the principal to fire him, then his wife and children would have to wander with him. The desire to move back to the big city would become an unattainable fantasy. The next day, the head coach complained in the principal's office. Fortunately, the principal only fired him from his position as assistant coach. After all, the school didn't want to lose the only physical education teacher and biology teacher. That weekend, when White was cleaning the yard at home, he was suddenly startled by the enthusiastic neighbor ant. The friendly Mexican ant sent him directly. White gave an old hen as a gift. It seems that although this place is a little poor, the enthusiasm between neighbors is incomparable to that in big cities. In order to raise this old hen, White went to the town store to buy a large bag of feed. Before leaving, he also took a bottle of iced cola for 3 yuan. As a result, he ran into several of his students drinking tap water as soon as he went out. He kindly reminded them that there was iced cola in the store, but they replied that tap water was free. It turned out that they had been washing cars from 5 a.m. to now, and they had to take a truck to the farm to pick before sunset. This was their daily routine during the holidays. On weekdays, they had to get up at 4:30 every day, and then get on a truck with sleepy eyes to the endless farm. They hunched over and hunched their backs to help the farmer pick, and only stopped their work when class was about to start, and then ran all the way towards the school against the wind and sand. The flying dust seemed to cast a thick fog over their future. That day, their female teacher took the initiative to find White, asked him if he was interested in hosting a parent-teacher meeting for immigrants here, or charity projects such as a food bank, because most people here are poor Mexican immigrants who need help, and these children are also victims who are not valued. They were born in the fields and will return to the fields after graduation, or they will be caught in the prison opposite the school. So the female teacher hopes that White can work with her to do what he can for these children. White was moved when he heard the female teacher's words. When he saw that the students in the class could run tirelessly around the playground, White immediately had a good way to help them. So White immediately found the principal and proposed the idea of forming a school cross-country running team to participate in the first cross-country championship held in California this year, but was rejected by the principal. Because cross-country running only belonged to private schools for aristocrats at that time, White was neither a cross-country coach nor had track and field experience, but White did not give up because of this. Because on the way home from school that day, he happened to see Thomas running in the field. He was carrying a bag and enduring the high temperature and running all the way in the field. His running speed once reached an astonishing 20 kilometers. Since then, White began to observe Thomas every day and found that he could run at the same speed every day. Just when he was excited about his discovery, but Thomas suddenly stopped him. Thomas ignored White's praise and just fiercely warned White not to follow him again. Then he turned and ran towards the endless farmland, as if that was his home. As soon as he got home, White immediately checked the results of previous cross-country races and found that Thomas could easily squeeze into the top 10 in the state with his current results. This was when Thomas had no guidance and no professional running shoes. Then White took out the education law enacted in California a few years ago. It clearly stipulated that public schools must have cross-country teams and cross-country coaches, so the principal could not refuse. In order to select outstanding team members, White prepared 4 bottles of iced drinks for them. As long as they could run into the top 4, they could get them for free. For children who drink tap water for a long time, iced drinks are very tempting. Soon, the outstanding talents of the 4 students were fully demonstrated. After class, White found Johnny, who had helped him before, and asked him to find a way to persuade the team members to join the cross-country team and deliberately emphasized that Thomas must join. So Johnny first found the student who was repairing the car and used sweet words to persuade him, and then jumped on the truck that was about to go to pick fruits to persuade him. On the other hand, White, who was eager to recruit talents, was not idle either. He first helped the student who stole change from the vending machine and then bribed him with a bottle of Coke. When he turned around, White happened to see Thomas fighting with someone. Seeing this scene, White couldn't help but secretly rejoice. Later, with the help of the principal, Thomas was not punished by the principal, provided that he must join the cross-country running team. In this way, under White's operation, the 7-member cross-country running team was officially established. However, before the training started, someone protested. How could there be a fat man in the team? But White said that Xiaopeng was the team's strong player because he needed Xiaopeng to unite the entire team. After all, the 3 brothers were in the team. Losing one was equivalent to losing 3. Since then, their training figures often appeared in every corner of the town. This strange scenery made the store owner sigh that the sun really came out from the west. The age gap made White gradually feel a little powerless. He stopped in front of the grocery store panting. The store owner couldn't help but handed him a bottle of Coke with admiration after seeing him. Even without the supervision of the teacher, the children were still very conscious. They took steady steps under the scorching sun. On the overpass, there was their will to never give up, and at the intersection, there were their indomitable figures. When they were tired of running, they drank a few sips of free tap water. Then he washed his worn-out shoes casually. Although Xiaopeng couldn't keep up with the others, he always gritted his teeth and persevered to the finish line. After a period of training, they welcomed an invitational competition. In order to make the children run comfortably, White paid for new running shoes and uniforms for the team members out of his own pocket. The sudden surprise made the team members smile. Before the game started, White told them the rules of the cross-country race. The first place got 1 point, the second place got 2 points, and so on. The total score is the sum of the scores of the top 5 teams. The team with fewer points will be ranked higher. Before seeing that they were still a little confused, White told them to just run hard. When walking towards the track, the greedy little fat boy didn't forget to take a bite. When they arrived at the starting line, the nobles from the private high school began to unite and mocked them, saying that they heard that you only run when the police are chasing you, or you need the temptation of Mexican food. This naked discrimination made Thomas, the leader, very unconvinced, so he decided to let them see his strength on the field. With the referee's gunshot, the large group officially marched towards the distant mountains and fields. After a long run, Thomas, who had been unwilling to give up from the beginning, suddenly exerted his strength on a beach. Unexpectedly, other high school athletes united to stop him from moving forward. Unable to bear it any longer, he pushed away the 2 bad guys and then ran forward with all his strength. However, the endless uphill made him exhausted. They had always run only on flat ground and could not adapt to the hills at all, so they lost the first game with the last place. This also gave those rich kids a chance to gloat. On the way back, White slowly took off his sunglasses and sincerely said to the children, "Apologize." He said that the loss of this race was not your fault at all, and that I should blame you for not inspecting the track in advance. You should know that your strength is far more than this, and your future is far more than this. As soon as he got home, White no longer hid his emotions, because the last place result could neither give him the opportunity to change jobs and get a raise, nor allow him to take his wife and daughter away from here. However, his wife reminded him to pay more attention to family matters at home, as tomorrow is his daughter's birthday, and his wife reminded White not to forget to pick up the cake he had ordered in advance, thinking only of the race. White agreed absent-mindedly. Based on the experience of the last failure, the next day White asked them to practice hill running in the sand full of almond shells. However, After only one round, Xiaopeng was so tired that he bent over to breathe. But White asked them to continue practicing until they got used to it and laughed at the hills. So they ran hard on the hills one round after another. The young figure was like a vivid picture scroll, constantly flowing with the rhythm of life. When everyone finished running and stopped to rest, Thomas had no intention of stopping. He ran and asked White loudly, "How many more laps do you want them to run? Although you can force us to run 100 times, 1,000 times, but it can't help us change this cold reality. In this poor McFarland, everyone's fate is determined at birth. He doesn't believe that running can change his fate. The roar of all his strength is just a lament for the powerless fate." Feeling meaningless, Thomas chose to quit without hesitation, but as soon as he got home, he saw his father losing his mind. For some reason, he was constantly hitting the wall with his hands. Thomas could only rush into the house to stop him. Depressed, White found out at the door that he not only missed his daughter's birthday at 6 o'clock, but even worse, he forgot to take the birthday cake. The belated father's love had to be filled with a useless happy birthday, but his daughter did not accept such perfunctory. The daughter locked her in the room. No matter how White called at the door, there was no response. Depressed, White was driving to relax at night, but unexpectedly found a familiar person sitting on the overpass. He walked up to see clearly that it was Thomas who left during the day. At this time, Thomas had a huge bruise on his face and tears in his eyes. It turned out that today was the first day his father, who worked away from home, came home. As soon as he got home, he found out that his young sister was pregnant before marriage. He was so depressed that he could only pound the wall to vent his anger. In order to prevent his father from getting his money-making hand injured, Thomas punched himself in the face when he stepped forward to stop him. This child is so sensible that it makes people feel distressed. At the same time, his eager behavior on the overpass is also unsettling. In order to stabilize Thomas, White also confided his troubles to Thomas. He was rejected by his daughter today because he forgot to buy a cake. However, it seems that their worries are not in the same dimension. After all, one is for survival and the other is for life. Seeing that Thomas could not be persuaded, White had to change his strategy. He said that if you jump from this height, you will definitely not be killed, but your 2 legs will definitely be scrapped. At that time, you will not only be unable to help your family, but also become a burden to the family. Even running, which you are best at, will become a distant luxury for you. After a persuasion with emotion and reason, Thomas finally gave up the idea of committing suicide and finally agreed to return to the cross-country team. After all, running is the only shining light in his dark days. Of course, this light is also related to White's future, is closely related to his daughter's. In order to achieve better results in the cross-country race, White began to study the theoretical knowledge of cross-country running. He also began to learn the subtle techniques of running from videotapes, and then rode his daughter's pink bicycle. He taught these techniques and knowledge to her day after day. The sunshine of hope fell between the mottled shadows of the trees. It loomed in the silent forest, precipitating every time of hard work and illuminating the way to the future. Not long after, in a campus competition, McFarland faced a highly ranked opponent. Before the game, White gathered all the players together and used his unique way to rally the people. He asked the children loudly where we came from, and the students shouted loudly, "McFarland." When the game started, although the McFarland children were slightly behind, endurance was the weapon that these children could easily use. When the opponent was exhausted, the main player Thomas was unusually calm and seemed to be determined to win the game. Sure enough, until the last stage of the schedule, he suddenly exerted his strength and easily surpassed his opponent, and the McFarland members behind him also began to lead one after another. In this way, they won the first victory since the team was formed, but they did not celebrate too much except for a simple hug. When the golden afterglow fell on them, their future seemed to be full of light and hope. But this little boat of hope encountered difficulties again just after it set sail. The next day, the 3 little fat brothers suddenly left without saying goodbye, so White had to visit them in person, but was asked by the strong mother to have dinner together. At the dinner table, the mother kept giving. White gave him extra food, leaving him no chance to speak, and before leaving, he asked him to take a box for his family to try. It was not until he left that he had the chance to meet the father of the 3 children. However, before he could speak, he was rejected by the father. He knew White's intention and said, "Cross-country running is like our TV. It is not a necessity for our family. Every hour my son trains with you means 1 less hour of work for me. Of course, I don't expect people like you to understand. After all, mountain birds and fish have different paths." However, White did not intend to give up. The next day, when the three brothers climbed onto the truck bound for the farm, they unexpectedly found White was among them. He followed a few people to the endless farm. Under the scorching sun, he bent over to help students cut cabbage. As the saying goes, you can't empathize without personal experience. In just half a day, White was exhausted and finally understood the hardships of these children. So he discussed with the children that if you have to harvest until late, we will postpone it. When there is a competition, I will come here with you to harvest in advance, so that we can meet the picking quota without delaying running, and I will come here to do what I can on weekends. And everything White did was seen by the mother of the three brothers. Although she was stubborn, she was not unreasonable. So in the morning of the next day, she mobilized the people in the town to take the initiative to hold a fundraising event for the cross-country team. As expected, all the enthusiastic Mexican immigrants in the town were present. Everyone gave their little love in a relaxed and pleasant atmosphere, and the children. Finally, they had customized uniforms and professional running shoes. With more suitable equipment, the cross-country team's training became more handy. Their footprints were everywhere, and their steps became more solid on the rugged paths of the Loess hillside. The teenagers stepped over the fields with rolling wheat waves, ran to the lush and flourishing forests, bypassed the quiet reservoir, and crossed the open wilderness. Every corner of the town was filled with their sweat, and the teenagers lived up to expectations. They soon won all the way as a dark horse, and even made the front page of the newspaper. Just when White was immersed in the victory in the newspaper, the previous Chinese teacher suddenly came in and read him an article written by a team member with great emotion. We are like blackbirds, flying over the citrus groves, flying high in the warm wind, and when we run, we seem to be the masters of the earth. When we run, our souls seem to fly into the sky, talking to the gods and gazing at the earth. At this moment, we are no longer immigrants or stupid Mexicans. The Chinese teacher was moved to tears. She sincerely thanked the changes that White brought to these children. They put aside their prejudices and sincerely welcomed White for the first time and said to him, "Welcome to McFarland." On the eve of the promotion game, White brought the children a thick college admission guide and told the children that once they enter the top 4 of this promotion game, they will have the opportunity to enter the university, so they can learn about the school and major they want to go to in advance. The promotion game will be held soon, and the fans of the cross-country team hold up posters and happily chase behind the cross-country team car to cheer for them. The seeds of running seem to be planted in the hearts of the children, because bringing a team from a poor and remote area into the promotion game, White also became famous in the circle. Before the game, a well-known school even took the initiative to hand him a business card. The opportunity to change jobs and get a raise that he had dreamed of came quietly at this moment. But facing this sudden temptation, he hesitated because he had already developed a deep relationship with the players. So he quietly put the business card in his pocket and then came to the side of the nervous players to cheer them up. With the referee's gunshot, the game officially began. This was an extremely anxious game because it was related to the qualification for further study. Everyone was desperately chasing. The main team, Thomas, was the first to take the lead, and the rest of the team followed closely. Soon, they came to the last big slope. The slope that had led them to defeat before became their winning weapon at this moment, because they had run up the hill of almond shells countless times just to climb over this mountain that changed their fate. But just when the finish line was within reach, Thomas looked back and fell unexpectedly. He quickly got up and chased after them. Even though he had tried his best, he only managed to get back the second place. This result made him feel. White frowned as he recorded the results, because their results were on the edge of promotion. Every time a name was written on the blackboard, it would cause a burst of cheers. But Thomas and his team were dejected and disappointed, until McFarland's name appeared in the 4th place. All the anxiety disappeared at this moment. The joy of promotion also relit their eyes. Fate did not disappoint the dreamer who tried his best after all. At the fork in the road on the way back, White did not choose to go back to the town directly, but took the children to a nearby seaside attraction. If it were not for the competition, these children might never come here, but the ticket to the beach costs $9.5, but White only has $5 scattered all over his body. In desperation, he could only beg the security guard to give him a discount, because the 7 children in the back seat had never seen the sea, looking at the faces full of expectation from the car window. The security guard really couldn't say no, and generously let them in for free. The teenagers who were trapped in the fields all day couldn't wait to get off the car. With at White's command, they rushed to the sea. They stepped on the soft and comfortable beach and jumped into the sea with the most unbridled posture in their lives. The setting sun sprinkled them with golden light representing hope, and the waves washed away the sand and dust that had accumulated on their bodies for a long time. The victory dispelled the haze that shrouded their hearts, and they laughed and celebrated the victory of the game unscrupulously. This victory ignited the enthusiasm of the town like a fire. In order to thank White for the honor he brought to the town, the residents specially held a grand coming-of-age ceremony for his eldest daughter. White finally made up for his previous debt to his daughter. The uncle of a team member even came with a luxury car team to help, and invited the little birthday girl to ride in the car according to local tradition. It was a good intention, but unexpectedly, he met his former mortal enemy on the road, and then White received the call when he rushed to the scene in a panic. The large area of bruises on his daughter's legs instantly made him feel heartbroken. White loudly rebuked Thomas and other members of the team who were accompanying him. At this time, anger overwhelmed his reason, and White's desire to leave became stronger at this moment. So the next day, with mixed feelings, he went to the high school that had offered him an olive branch before for an interview. The environment here was elegant and well-equipped, and it was simply the job destination he had longed for. The other party not only treated him with courtesy, but also offered him a higher position with double the salary, but now the eldest daughter was unwilling to leave. She even informed Thomas, who had already been in love with her, of her father's intention to leave. Thomas. He could not hide his disappointment, but also expressed his understanding. After all, people go up and water flows down. If they were not forced, who would be willing to stay in this poor and remote place for a lifetime? After listening to Thomas's words, White was entangled again. He was reluctant to leave this town because it was this town that took him in when he had nothing. He also remembered the chicken given by the neighbor's aunt when he first came to the town, the soda handed by the store owner, and those warm moments, every sunset and day with the team members. The wife also told him that living in McFarland feels like home, and when the night of the coming-of-age ceremony was in danger, it was your team members who stood in front of your daughter without hesitation. The injury on her leg was just caused by an accident to protect her. Do you think there will be people who are so desperate after leaving McFarland? Protect your daughter? I know it's hard to decide, but please don't just consider the security here. There's no place where I live that feels like home like McFarland. White couldn't help but fall into deep thought again after hearing his wife's words. On the day of the finals, all the teachers and students in the school came to see the team off. They were all looking forward to the first championship trophy of McFarland High School. The store that had never closed for 25 years was closed for the first time. The school bus was full of hope, and all the residents drove to the stadium. The scene of the championship was very spectacular. Xiaopeng was so nervous that he vomited. As usual, he had to sing the national anthem before the game. When the word hometown was mentioned in the national anthem, the first thing that came to White's mind was the moments he had spent with his teammates in McFarland. At this moment, he seemed to have the answer in his heart. He told the children that these people definitely did not have your strength, because they had never experienced the hardship of working in the fields in the early hours of the morning. They had never experienced the hardship of doing farm work after a day of classes. They could not even imagine the hardships you had experienced. They came just to compete, while you came to change your future. People like you should also win this honor. After saying this, he made a unique cheering gesture with the team members. As the starting gun sounded, all the top teams started a fierce competition, but team member Jose was too nervous to stay ahead at the beginning of the game, completely forgetting their tactics of exerting force in the later stages. If he continued like this, there would be only two results for him. Either he would tire himself to death by persisting to the end, or he would be easily surpassed by the team behind due to lack of physical strength. Obviously, he was the latter. The weak pace became slower and heavier. When Xiaopeng saw that Hexi was not in good condition, he immediately tried his best to speed up and rushed forward. It was time for him to stand up at this moment. As time passed by bit, the track was measured step by step, and the race finally ushered in the exciting sprint stage. At this moment, Thomas was far ahead of the others, leading the tunnel near the finish line. He looked back at the darkness behind him and rushed towards the light ahead. But the sudden strength of his opponent made Thomas fall to the second place. Seeing that the finish line was within reach, the exhausted Thomas once again burst out with strong willpower. Finally, at the last moment of rushing to the finish line, he surpassed his opponent and won the first place. However, their situation was not optimistic. The original number 2 scorer, Hexi, was nowhere to be seen at this moment. He was more than a minute slower than usual. If this continued, they would not be able to win. Just as when White was in despair, Thomas suddenly reminded him to look forward. an unexpected figure appeared in the crowd. It was the little fat man who always came last in the team. Everyone's eyes were focused on Thomas before, but they didn't notice that the little fat man was actually improving in every game. At this moment, he burst out with all his potential and quickly surpassed one opponent after another. The coach once comforted the little fat man, "You are the best player in the team." At this moment, he finally proved himself with his actions, because the little fat man's amazing counterattack at the last moment. The whole team won a good result that they had never dared to think of before. When the judges announced that the champion was McFarland, all the small-town residents on the scene were instantly boiling, but just as everyone was immersed in the victory, White walked towards the high school team that wanted him to join the team, shook hands with them one by one, and then returned with a smile under everyone's nervous eyes. At this moment, everyone's mood began to become uneasy, but he did not go to take up the position but to refuse, and finally, he chose to stay in McFarland. Stay in this second hometown with a sense of belonging, incarnate the seeds of true love, and spread sunshine and hope to this dark land. McFarland is directed by Nicky Caro, starring Kevin Costner and Carlos Pras Sports. Biographical film released in 2015. The film tells the story of a group of Mexican teenagers in trouble in the barren land of McFarland. Under the White coach, under the leadership of White, they embarked on a running journey to change their destiny. They had no superior training conditions, no expectations and support from the outside world. But with their love for running and their desire to change their destiny, they challenged their limits again and again on the simple track and on the rugged mountain road, and finally succeeded. And in 1987 and the following 14 years, McFarland High School won 9 state championships under the leadership of White. Well, today's movie sharing ends here. Welcome to like, comment, and forward. Thank you for your patience. I look forward to meeting you next time.